Hey, thanks for joining me. You know what? I want to look through the John Byrne Xmen Artist Edition again. Um, I thought it'd only been like a year since the last time I looked at this book, but I just went and checked on my channel and looked at the one time I uploaded the previous video, and it's been 2 years, 2 whole years since I looked at this thing on the channel, which actually shocked me. I thought it'd been maybe just one. So I don't know. Time's kind of flying in a weird way. But, again, like I say, I may have already looked at it on the channel, but I get new subscribers and maybe some people haven't had the chance to see this. And it's always fun to have an opportunity to discuss art. So we're going to do it. We're going to look at the John Byrne Artist Edition. We'll look at the actual art on the cover here inside the book later. I covered a lot of stuff in my last video, and there's so much history written about the Claremont Byrne era of X-Men. Like, what more could I add to it? I'm not a historian of any type. I just look at this stuff and just kind of marvel at the work. When I look at this art and this version of the X-Men, like the X-Men that I kind of claim for my own are the ones from the 90s when Jim Lee took over. That's when I was young and getting into the X-Men, and that's where my childhood nostalgia is deeply rooted in. And it's that kind of stuff that I personally love and have all the nostalgia for. But having had the opportunity when I was younger at the same time to be reading classic X-Men when they were reprinting these books and reading them on a monthly basis and then kind of learning about the characters as time has gone on, I look at this era, even though it's not the one I grew up with, but this era, the Claremont John Byrne era, this is the best the X-Men have ever been or probably ever will be. I can't imagine there being a better version. And this version of them is rooted in the past, meaning I look at them, and these are characters from the late 70s and early 80s. That's when these characters are like, that's the era they live in. I look at the 90s X-Men, and maybe it's just because that's what I grew up with, I kind of still feel like those designs fit in the modern world. And there's a lot of resurgence and kind of pop culture nostalgia for that 90s stuff. You know, the whole X-Men 97 cartoon, for example, that stuff comes out and leans heavily into the 90s aesthetic, and it still works. I don't know if any of this is making any sense, but this version, to me, looks like it's from the 70s and 80s, and therefore it's an older team from an older era, but it's still the best version of them. The costumes have never been more perfect. The storylines never worked better. The art, I mean, we're here mainly to talk about the art. It's kind of unbelievable how talented John Byrne, I was going to say was, but he's still alive and he's still drawing. He's actually putting together, most of us know that, I can't remember what it's called off the top of my head. Basically, he just kind of continued doing a fan comic of the X-Men that he's been drawing for years, like tons. Do I remember correctly? Something like 30 issues that Marvel has finally come to some kind of an agreement with to get it inked, colored, and printed up to see John Byrne draw these characters, picking up from, as I understand it, exactly where he took off and left. Fascinating idea. It's so neat to know that that's coming. But the talent that guy had, that John Byrne guy, he seems like he's, and I don't say this as a negative, but he seems like he's a pretty opinionated guy. He's a guy that has butted heads with some other creatives out there, and that's to be, I guess that's normal, right? I mean, if you're kind of, you care about your work and you're confident in your skill and you have a direction, you want things to go, and then other people want to come along and fuck it up, I get that you're going to butt heads. And I'll give credit to anybody. If you know somebody who's got an attitude about their work and the way that they present themselves and go about their daily life, but if the work that they produce is absolute top-notch quality like this, the guy can kind of have the ego and the attitude all day because he's kind of earned it. So again, it all kind of comes down to what is your personal preference on things. I was doing a live stream recently and I was kind of flipping through this, And that's when I was like, you know what, I want to look at it on the channel again. And one of my good friends kind of chimed in. He's like, John Byrne's work, I never really cared for it. And I was like, you and I aren't friends anymore. How can you not like this? And he explained, he's like, he understands it and he respects it, but it just never connected with him in a way that made him care. And I was like, all right, that's fair. I guess we're friends again. That's fine. But I can understand how a person could look at this stuff and not be blown away by it if you weren't raised on it and read it in real time and kind of got to live with these characters in the moment. If this is something you kind of come to after the fact, I could see a person looking at it and going, I mean, it's fine, I guess. It kind of is like old school in its presentation, the way the stories are told. There's a lot of kind of arguments I guess a person could make as to why it's not their favorite thing, and I understand that. It's certainly not my favorite thing, but goddamn, do I respect the hell out of the skill set. Every panel is highly detailed and clear, and John Byrne doesn't skimp on anything anywhere, it seems. And as I understood it, he produced this level of work on a monthly basis for years, never taking a break. Or maybe some minimal breaks. But if I understand correctly, he was on the book for a big, long run with no break. But the amount of detail in the backgrounds and all the characters, every page is just filled with the most perfect amount of detail that you could ever hope to see on a comic book page. John Byrne's storytelling, his compositions, his figure work, to produce the level of work that he does, he has to understand the human figure so well and know how to do perspective and, 1 and 2 and 3 point perspective grids and how to put in detailed backgrounds everywhere. Just his ability to understand and know how to do all of that kind of stuff. And then, of course, he's paired up with Terry Austin on inks. Look at this panel. These just whatever generic Canadian soldiers in this techno background. Every panel has lush backgrounds. And of course, I say that when there's 2 panels with essentially no backgrounds, but that's not needed in these panels. He could if he needed to, but, it's all about kind of just the conversation between Wolverine and what's her name here. It's astonishing how advanced the work is, how consistent it was, how clean and perfect it is. It's just, again, it's not my favorite art. I was actually going to look at the Jim Lee Artist Edition. I've got it sitting right over here, right next to me. In fact, I'm going to grab it. The art in this gets me personally psyched up and excited to draw more than this. But there's something about the respect that is due to the John Byrne version that the Jim Lee one just can't match. John Byrne had a longer run. I'm not dissing on Jim Lee's art at all. This is my favorite era of his stuff. This stuff in this book right here. I wanted to look at this one actually first, but again, I decided to do this one because I've already looked at the Jim Lee one, I think twice on my channel. But you know what? The 3rd time is coming up soon because it's for me. And why not? I want to look at what I want to look at. But I don't know. I don't know what I could say beyond what I just did about every one of these pages is just such a work of art. Great backgrounds. And again, it's not also about being detailed. It's about positioning the characters in a way where it's clear where he's at. It's clear where Wolverine's at. The separation of the figures. The backgrounds are detailed. It's not just about being able to draw a pretty figure. It's about composition and storytelling, which are tricks that are hard to learn. A person can draw a dynamic image, sure, but can you tell a story and have it be more than just close up on the face and grimacing teeth and flexing, punching moves? To have subtle body language going on and have actual depth and meaning. It's so much involved. Look at this top panel. They're in a river. Probably a lake is the proper term. Rocks, grass, trees, some lines in the background indicating atmospheric clouds or something like that. Up here, characters sitting up against the trees. The way that the image is composed with the guy holding the girl up here, but then the other two are set off to the side, but you leave enough space for the word balloons. The inking is clean and clear and just perfect. It's just kind of unbelievable how good these guys were. And there's a lot of artists that are on this level in different varying degrees, but if there's a Mount Rushmore of American superhero comic book artists, John Byrne has to be on there, right? To produce this level of work. I love the close-up, putting the hand up front here, the big, thick ink lines, because, of course, that's what you do when you have something in the foreground. You get a big, thick, fat, chunky line up here because it puts the image closer, to the eye of the camera, and then things in the background got thinner lines. It puts that into the distance. This is all kind of standard stuff that any professional inker understands, and it looks so great. The shiny metallic metal rendering on Colossus's arm there, his body there. It is also fascinating to look at how good these scans are. Like the paper it's printed on is pure white, but then you get the actual pages and how they're yellowing, places where I'm guessing maybe there's something like tape across the top. People are scribbling all over it. They cut the corners off for whatever fucking reason under the sun, that they just chop these things up. It's just, and the reproduction of it, the whole point of these books obviously is to take the original art and just scan it as it is and not do any cleanup. No cleaning up of the borders, no deleting all the text and the writing and the whiteout. So you can look at what the page actually looks like as it is today. This is in somebody's personal collection, and you can tell, like, when they're yellow like this, like somewhere, some way, somehow, maybe it sat in the sun, or somebody was a heavy smoker and the art wasn't protected. Who knows? I also kind of have to say that I'm not a fan of I appreciate the fact that John Byrne has signed this page, and it looks like just with like a blue Bic pen. And he says, "Regards, John Byrne." But I would personally rather have him sign that shit on the top edges or something. I don't want the signature in the middle of the art. I don't know. That's just me. Great shot of Wolverine, and I can't get over the inking. Terry Austin. I happen to know a guy who has spoken to Terry Austin personally. And if I have my information right, Terry Austin was kind of, at least at some point in his career, not particularly, as I understand it, he wasn't like personally thrilled with the work he did. Like, he thought that his inking was kind of stiff and lifeless. And again, I'm relaying information that I was told from somebody who heard it from him, and I trust the source 100%. But boy, I just can't imagine agreeing with that on the slightest. Like, I love this side shot. Interesting panel layout to have Wolverine's head, because he's locked up here, and he's just incessantly stressing on these chains, and he's grunting and, to snap these things to get himself free. But that side shot, to choose to have the side shot of his face angled flat down like this. And then I love these thick lines with the varying line weights. It's thicker up here, gets thinner at the bridge of his nose, and then down at the tip. Super heavy, thick black right there under the part of his upper lip, and then under his lower lip, and then under his chin. It's so good. And I can kind of see in the line weight, I'm just kind of assuming that Terry Austin uses a brush. But, the lines are kind of, to a degree, kind of, I was going to say that there's not a lot of varying line widths to them. They're kind of like a static line of the same kind of thickness. That's not exactly true. But he has a way of kind of feathering him from in the pure black, and then have him kind of closer together, then spacing him out to kind of have it fade out. I guess I can kind of see what Terry Austin might be thinking when he was talking about feeling that maybe his inks weren't quite to the level that he personally wanted them to be at. But boy, it just works so well. It's clean, it's clear, it's slick. There's nothing you could do to this art for this era that would make it better than the way that it is right now. You know, and if a person needed to study an artist, even if you don't like care for his specific rendering style, just to understand John Byrnes, again, I mention it multiple times, his compositions and his storytelling. Look at the backgrounds of this shot. Magneto coming into a building, kind of a low angle looking up. It's tilted. In fact, that's like straight from the How to Draw Comics the Marvel Way. You know, for those of you who have seen that book, there's a page in there that's talking about dynamic storytelling. We're having a guy walking into a room, and it's just straight on looking at the guy. Doors open, guy's walking in. But then you tilt it, and then lower the camera angle so we're down looking up at it as the guy walks in through the door. It instantly creates a sense of drama and dynamic kind of storytelling. And there's a perfect example of it. Great door, got the handle and the latching system on the door, got the trim around the door, the transom glass around the top of it. Perfect. And then inside the building that he's inside, this perfectly well executed, elaborate desk, cup of coffee or tea or something, a lampshade on it. There's shutters, there's a vent. Like all this amazing detail on the inside of this building. And some artists just can't do that. Great exterior shot with the buildings. Like, it's just fascinating how good John Byrne was at everything. And then being paired up with an inker like Terry Austin. I mean, it's hard to say. You could argue that potentially the book doesn't look as good with a different inker. Even if you pair him up with an inker who's great, sometimes there's just not that meshing of styles that works as good as a particular penciler and a particular inker in a particular era on a particular book. It's just all things come together to make the perfect product, and it just works so well. Great shot of this giant like dinosaur claw hand going after Banshee. Look at the amazing textures. The lumpy, leathery skin. Again, the pencil, like you can imagine what the penciling must look like. It would look freaking amazing. But then again, Terry Austin's inks on this look so great. It's so organic and powerful. Got everything underneath this, the under part of this giant monster that's like, this is a leg bent up to grab him, and that's the under part of its body, and then its leg coming down. So fascinating. And then, of course, all the face shots kind of like, to me, identify the X-Men in a bygone era, but then are the peak versions of them. That is peak Cyclops, Nightcrawler, Wolverine. It just looks like them in their best version from the 70s and 80s. Fascinating stuff. Great splash page with Sauron there. The hot girl, that's a tricky angle to draw her at. Having Cyclops up here, top of his head, getting his visor in there at that particular angle, getting the details on that. I also really like the kind of cloudy, smoky stuff done in the background, done with, I don't know what, some kind of chalk, colored pencil, grease pencil, something, whatever it may be. Because it's the same thing that was used on the background on the cover. On these things back here. It's just black, rendering tools like ink, just done in a lighter kind of mid-tone. Fascinating, the way they have all these loops and curves to give it that smoky kind of texture. Oh my gosh, this stuff is so great. Great shot. Sauron diving out of the way as Wolverine comes at charge. And again, I've seen better versions of Wolverine, in as much as the version of Wolverine that I am personally interested in. For example, bear with me while I flip through this book. There's a million examples. But my favorite version of Wolverine is that son of a bitch right there. I love that shot of Wolverine there. That shot of him there slicing up at Cameron Hodge. That shot of him there diving at the soldiers. It's just, to me, so much more dynamic and interesting and modern and That's my version of Wolverine. This is the original classic version. It's kind of the same thing when you get down to the bare bones of it. It's the same guy, same basic costume, the same attitude, doing the same thing. Slashing his claws at a bad guy he wants to take out. But they're just from such different eras, not that far apart, really, you know, a decade and a half in terms of when the books were published. But yeah, this version of the X-Men and Wolverine, this is my jam. And like my opinion on like one of the best drawings of Wolverine ever is that one right there. Like John Byrne never drew a version of Wolverine that looked like that. And that's not to say it as a negative on John Byrne's version, because he had a very specific version. This version of Wolverine had been through absolute hell and been just deconstructed and torn apart. This version of Wolverine, he was still a feisty scrapper, but story-wise, he hadn't quite been put through the ringer yet. So I don't know. I'm just kind of speaking off the cuff here. They're just the same guy, just at two different points in their lives, and they are rendered in very different ways. But love this version of them. This version of the X-Men. God, look at how yellow that page is. Again, is someone just smoking cigars right in front of it on a daily basis? Again, amazing, clear storytelling, clear backgrounds, perfect angles of fighting. And none of these are done with like those big anchor images like you saw with the Jim Lee stuff, the stuff that the image guys end up doing, where you dedicate a specific image on every page to be the badass one that makes everyone kind of go, oh my God, look at that. It's just basic panel storytelling, but every panel is flawless and perfect. So fantastic. Again, how some of those other pages, like the ones we were just looking at here, that are so yellowed, and then these other ones that have been preserved so much nicer. Again, detailed backgrounds in even the smallest panels. It's probably easier to do detailed backgrounds in a smaller panel because you just kind of confine it down to a smaller space and have less drawing surface area to worry about. Does that make it quicker? Yeah, I don't know who this character is. I never did get to read these issues, but the way that he's rendered, very creepy, very cool. He was back here on this other page that I was kind of not talking about the character. Yeah, such an interesting way to render that guy. He looks really neat. Gosh, look at the atmospheric inking in this. With the lightning bolt striking through it, waves blowing, rain, wind. It's all there. All this atmospheric motion and power in a black and white ink drawing by a penciler and inker putting skills together and trusting each other. I would actually be interested to, now that I think about it, I don't know if I've ever, I have to assume it's out there, but I don't know that I've ever read an interview where John Byrne talked about his working relationship with Terry Austin or vice versa. I know that Claremont and Byrne butted heads, and it kind of seems like we all kind of want to attribute Claremont to being the driving force of the success of this era of X-Men, when it seems to be the case that Byrne had a much bigger hand in the plotting of it and deserves a much bigger hand or recognition for credit for the stories that were created, because he did have a big hand in it, and it's not all Claremont. But, so we know there's a history of Byrne and Claremont butting heads, and as I understand it, the tensions that rose between them were the reason that John Byrne took off. I think he went to go do Fantastic Four. But has Byrne ever talked about his opinion on Terry Austin inking him? I can only imagine, without having looked that up and researched it, that he must have been fine with it, because Austin inked him forever, and if Byrne didn't like it, I imagine he could have piped up and said, this guy fucking sucks. I don't like what he's doing to my pencils. Lose the guy and let's get somebody better. But since they stayed together forever, I'm just assuming it must be the case that they got along. Sorry, I can't tell if, okay, it's just one page. God, puke yellow. Good Lord. Let's just put this in our smoking room and stare at it while it's just laying on a table. But yeah, I just have to imagine that Byrne and Austin must have got along. I'm guessing. If you know specifically, I would love to hear in the comments about this, about whether or not my assumptions are correct. But I just kind of assumed that Byrne would have said something if he was not happy with the lines that Austin was throwing down. But he must be, because they work together, and it just looks great. They must. I couldn't imagine them all not looking back on this work with pride at the work that they did in the era, on the schedule that they did. A great car, great background with buildings and windows and recessed entryways, trash cans, garbage, debris, all in perfect perspective. So simple, but so perfect. And again, how about this shot of the inside of this store or whatever it is? Low angle, because you can see that these are seats that you sit in at a bar here. But if the camera angle is looking straight on at the lower level of them, that the camera is sitting low on the ground, so then you have to kind of make sure everything's in the proper perspective from the low angle that you choose on that. Oh, this is kind of interesting. I never noticed this before. In this upper panel, there's a comic rack and a magazine rack. There's fantastic. It says Fantastic, some Starlog, GQ, Creepy, probably TV Guide. And then there's a comic rack. Invaders, Masters of Kung Fu, Dracula, Marvel, Hoo-Ha, I think it says. Doomsday, Tarzan, X-Men. Someone says just Lash. Could be Flash. I don't know. Iron Man, Spider-Woman, Star Wars, Captain Marvel, Ms. Marvel, Avengers, Hulk, Howard the Duck, What If. That's fun. Just throwing in like a comic rack and putting all the titles in there. Super fun. Again, hyper detailed interior. Overhead shot looking down. So you got a 3-point perspective going on. Filled with different characters and all the junk and writing and just the scuzzy room that they're in. It looks like someone vomited on it on the edges. Interesting page here with the stupidest villain ever arcade. Is this did the artist just color it because they wanted to? Because it looks like this is the full-size thing, not a color guide. I don't know. Who cares? Spider-Man, guest starring in the X-Men. Not my favorite shot of Spider-Man. It definitely looks like a classic old-school version of Spider-Man with the little tiny eyes. The anatomy's a little goofy through the arms through there. But, I think we can give John Byrne a pass for having a not amazing page, considering the level of quality of everything else that he's put into this stuff. I love this shot of Storm going underwater, and then the cross-hatching being dark down here and getting lighter, and it stops being cross-hatching, just kind of lines going straight across, and then fading out, and then back in, and then fading out. So great. Great background tech on all of that stuff. There's another low-angle shot. Dutch angle, tilted, low angle looking up, character opening up the door, but covered in shadow because he's walking into a dark room. It's raining outside. God. You know what's crazy is, I look at the Jim Lee Artist Edition, and I kind of want to say that in his own way, it's no less technically advanced than this, as far as Jim Lee drawing and John Byrne drawing. They approach it differently, and they have different styles, but maybe I would say the only difference is that it's hard to beat John Byrne's storytelling. I know some people want to harp on Jim Lee for not having great storytelling, and I don't know that I agree with that. He's not the best like John Byrne, but I never struggle to follow a Jim Lee story, ever. So, but looking at the work and just seeing how it's the same skill sets are there. I can see Jim Lee putting in the same figures. It's clear. I can follow them. There's backgrounds all over the place. Jim Lee knows how to do all of that. But yeah, I don't know. They're just such different eras of the exact same characters, and they're all perfect in their own way. And the stories, like, I was growing up reading X-Men during the Extinction Agenda, the Extinction Agenda, and the kind of end of the Uncanny X-Men run with Jim Lee before he went on to go do the original, the X-Men #1. And I was reading all those in real time, and man, those stories that are sticking with me. But this stuff right here, this is where I started reading the classic X-Men, was the Proteus saga. And again, I was very young, maybe 10 years old. I'm not sure when the issue was released. I mean, I've already reviewed them all. But I'm going to say they're out there 86, 87, 88, I think, in terms of when the classic X-Men books were reprinted. Maybe a little bit later. I'm not for sure. Maybe it was 88 or 89. Either way, the point was I was so young. And this Proteus saga and then the Dark Phoenix saga that I read subsequently, those stories have stuck with me as like some of my favorite things of all time. But the same thing goes with the Jim Lee stories. It's just kind of interesting how when you're reading something when you're younger and these things just are burned into your brain. This fight between Cyclops and Wolverine, because Wolverine had gone through hell with Proteus because he is a reality warping mutant, and it fucked up with Wolverine's brain because Wolverine's entire existence as a kind of a man connected to nature, when nature itself is warped out of understanding, it screwed him up more so than anyone else. And Cyclops recognized that Wolverine was kind of being gun shy. And he's like, I got to snap his ass out of it. So Cyclops instigates a fight with him to get Wolverine off his ass. Because Wolverine was literally sitting on the ground, holding a cup of coffee, I think, shaking in fear from what he just saw. And he couldn't form a sentence. And Cyclops understood what was going on. So he's like, if I don't get him to snap out of this now, he may not ever recover. So he instigates a fight with this motherfucker. And they're kind of going at it back and forth on these pages, 10 and 11. And the X-Men are like, what the hell is Cyclops doing? Jean Grey, of course, understands. She reads his mind. I love this shot, how Cyclops fires a beam and bounces it off Colossus's body to smack Wolverine into the back, then grabs Wolverine, kicks him up, and kicks him away, sending Wolverine's body flying at Nightcrawler. Perfect storytelling. And they're fighting, but there's a reason for the fight. It's actually a man, like Cyclops doesn't like Wolverine too much, but he's helping him. That's why Cyclops can be such a great leader. He's so good. Love this shot of Storm. She doesn't understand what's going on, so she's kind of piping up and telling everyone to fucking knock it off. Love that shot with her hair kind of like glowing white and then the black in the background on it. And then this shot with the lightning bolt kind of crackling out of her hand. This stuff is all so great. I love it so much. And again, the story point, the fight has a reason to exist. It's not just like certain modern comics that you all know what I'm talking about that are being published currently by a certain big name guy, where it's nothing but fight, punch, fight, punch, grimace, walk around, and pretend that there's drama. But this shit is so earned in the story. And you got an artist who knows how to illustrate it beautifully and perfectly. That's the shit that sticks with you. This is the stuff that you remember, is when you have beautiful art combined with stories that matter. Like, you care about these characters. You're concerned when they're going through this hellhole of a situation against this Proteus guy. And you're proud when the villain is essentially undefeatable. No one could beat this guy. But you find out that for some reason, the mutant Proteus is susceptible to metal. Metal is deadly. His physical body got vaporized, and he's just existing, Proteus, as an energy being. And so Colossus, in his human form, I love these three panels. It's so beautiful. And the art, the inking, the penciling, the storytelling is flawless and beautiful. And it's Colossus is given the moment to be amazing. He understands that you are susceptible to metal. So then he changes and you get this panel of his crackling energy to be the metallic version of himself. And I love every bit of that drawing. The musculature, the shiny metallic sheen rendering, and the shot of Colossus just punching his metal fists into the core of the energy being whose only weakness is metal. And that kills it, the bad guy. And Colossus saved the day. The big, young, youthful, kind-hearted artist had to kill the villain, and he did it. And he shines all the brighter because he's glowing, because he's shiny and metallic, and the sun's glinting off him, right? Great. It's a fantastic story. That's why these X-Men were so goddamn good. It might be overly wordy in the way that Claremont does it, but if you can kind of look past that and just read these stories, it is all so unbelievably fantastic and works on every level. God. Hell of an ass shot. Love that zipatone. There's two different zipatones, a grainy kind of one on her ass cheeks, and then on this shiny part of her costume, her glove and that sash across her. It's a different kind of zipatone with just the straight up and down lines. It gives it two different textures. Love that shot of her face. Great hyper detailed backgrounds. Another great, look how bright white this page is. There's no yellowing on it at all. Art looks fantastic. This panel, tilted angle, swirling water, sewer pipes dumping water in as Wolverine's being swept away, long pipes and debris stuff going into the distance, a great panel down here of Storm flying through the building, and perfect, unbelievable backgrounds of this mansion. It looks like a rich, ritzy building, which it was. It's the Hellfire Club that they're in. This unbelievably beautiful cabinet here, this desk drawer, there's the handle and the parts that mount it to the face of the drawer there, the engravings and scroll work in it, a plant, corner beading, edging, another table, another lamp, chair rail and trim around it, curtains. It's unbelievable that this art has that much detail in it. How does an artist know how to come up with these design elements? Do you just look at buildings around you and take pictures? Do you just commit it to your memory? How do you know what details to add to give it such life, especially in this era? It's not like you can just Google this shit. Excuse me. I've always wondered how artists back in the day, especially as good as John Byrne was, how did they get the detail of things like that? They talk about morgue files, I think they call them, with just magazines where they just save stuff, rip it out of a magazine and save it for reference for later. I guess you just do whatever you have to do. And that's the kind of the difference of an artist whose stuff just stands out and excels better than someone who's just kind of half-assing it. Great Wolverine scene. He's going after the Hellfire Club, tossing the soldiers around. Interesting that these pages don't have the word balloons on them. I wonder how and why that kind of come up. If they just put the word balloons on a photocopy of it? Because if this is the original art, where's the word balloons? Not that I mind. Sometimes I kind of like the pages without the word balloons. Great shots. These just classic versions of these guys. Colossus, Storm, Nightcrawler, Cyclops. They all are so distinct and different, but you know who they are. And like most of us, we all love them. There's a shot where Wolverine comes down against this Leland guy and smashes into him. I always thought that Wolverine killed this guy. But I think somebody was leading me to believe that he actually did not kill him. But I thought that he did. That the Leland guy actually died because Wolverine stabbed him to death. Another great shot. Goddamn. Great backgrounds. Look at the carpet. And then, again, the detailed exquisite stuff on the walls to make it feel like this rich Hellfire Club mansion. More perfect backgrounds there. Sebastian Shaw looking out the window with rain and water cascading down the window, but you got these little silhouette shapes of the X-Men running away. And this exterior shot. There's, again, a lake or something like that. It's raining. There's a hill. There's trees, bushes, a bench, buildings. It's all detailed and it looks amazing. And then, of course, we get the shot. I was just thinking about how, who wouldn't love to own this page? The original, first shot of the Dark Phoenix in the story. I mean, that page has to go for 5 or 6 digits, right? At minimum. Like, what an amazing page it would be to own the original art of the first appearance of the Dark Phoenix like that. Love the circular energy motion that kind of blends into her hair. Powerful shot as she's just there. And this is the end of the issue. She turned, like, the X-Men went through absolute hell fighting the Hellfire Club, like, barely surviving. Like, they went through some of the darkest stuff they've ever been through just to rescue Jean Grey. And she's been kind of like falling apart. They get her. They're outside. Everything seems like it's fine. They get to their weird looking jet. It doesn't look like the Blackbird. I don't know what the fuck that is, but whatever. But then she just, the end of the issue, as bad as everything was for the X-Men, going through the terrible storyline, terrible in terms of like what the characters went through. It was like the best X-Men storyline, but for all the hell they just went through, and they just want to get home and relax and chill out and decompress, but things go from bad to unbelievably in orders of magnitude worse when she suddenly becomes the Dark Phoenix and blows up their jet, and that's how that issue ended. You know, next issue, Dark Phoenix. What a great way to start out. And again, more incredible atmospheric line work with rain falling as the team fight her, to be drawing rain all the time. Look at the energy pouring off Dark Phoenix as she comes swooping down. Like, the X-Men just couldn't begin to believe that things were as bad as they were and how much worse they were going to get. Here's another page that appears to be preserved exquisitely. Just a little bit of yellowing. I mean, it looks like there's actual tape still on it. I wonder if like somebody got the page with tape on it and they just chose to never take it off, or that's what the page actually looks like. Maybe there's tape on it and they took it off and that's what the paper yellowed under it because of the adhesives on the tape. I don't know. But the rest of it, for the most part, the art is still very pristine, black and white. Yeah, I have reviewed the entire Dark Phoenix saga on my channel. If you've never seen that story, never had the chance to read it, I cannot recommend it more. In my opinion, it stands up. It is the best X-Men story that's ever been done. You know, it just can never be surpassed. And it's a fucking shame that the movies have like fucked it up twice. Great shot. I like Wolverine's mask on this little whatever the hell this thing is. And it's interesting that they kind of are illustrating his mask to be a rigid thing, not a floppy piece of cloth. Great stuff. But I don't know. I'm just kind of on repeat here, just marveling at how, again, perfectly detailed every panel is. Swooping energy, composition, storytelling, as the X-Men, tired and worn down, are fighting the Starjammers, or not the Starjammers, the Imperial Guard for Jean Grey's life, because they want to kill her because, well, if you know what happened, you know, Jean Grey, the Dark Phoenix, she wiped out an entire planet. She's too dangerous to live, so they're going to kill her. But the X-Men have to face the Imperial Guard, which they were never going to beat, but they still fought to the last man and lost. And Jean Grey ended up dying, and it was pretty sad in terms of comic book stories. It's one of those things that really hits you in the core if you're reading it and it meant something to you and you liked it. Fantastic stuff. And then, of course, we get into the issue. I think this is the issue where Wolverine changes his outfit from the black and yellow to the brown and tan. And to me, that was the maturing of Wolverine from kind of impulsive, kind of angry guy to a guy who'd matured to become comfortable with the fact that he's an X-Man and he knows his place, he knows his role. And that's my favorite version of Wolverine. And then they changed him back into the yellow outfit. And a long time ago, after going from yellow back to the brown and tan, now he's back to the yellow, and he's kind of stayed there forever. Brown and tan is the best version. I really like the Wendigo, but I do have to say, the first time I ever read a story with the Wendigo in it that I remember was when McFarlane did that Spider-Man run. And he had those 5 issues, I think it was, Perceptions. where Wolverine was in it, and McFarlane drew the Wendigo in there. And to me, that version is the best version. This is certainly fine, but that's the version that I like. God, there's another impeccably preserved page. Look how crisp, black and white that is next to this yellowed garbage. Oh, man. Anyway, yeah, the McFarlane Wendigo. That was my jam. I'd only heard of the character, but I hadn't read him in those issues, so until those issues. But just kind of getting to the end of it, we're going to get into a place where we get to look at some of the covers, which, of course, look fantastic. Oh, man, great shot. Holy shit, is that amazing. Bad guys lined up here, facing off. Composition's fantastic. Preserved pages are amazing. This scene where Wolverine's going to kick the shit out of somebody. I think he was going to stab Mystique to death because she's pretending to be, in disguise. And Wolverine's he knows who the fake one is. He's going to use his claws. And Storm, who's in charge now because Cyclops took off after the death of Jean Grey, she's telling him, you don't ever use your claws unless I tell you so. And she kind of explains, like, you have superior speed and strength, an unbreakable skeleton. You're nearly invulnerable. You shouldn't need to use your claws except in the most extreme situations. So you put those fucking things away. And Wolverine was not happy about it, but he did, follow her instruction. He's like, we'll talk about this again later. This conversation's not done. I always thought that was an interesting kind of character development moment. But that was the end of the pages, and there's some random... This is an unpublished splash page, penciled and inked by Byrne. Looks good. Corner box art, I think. Great pencil work. You can see what John Byrne's pencils would have looked like, which are pretty spectacular, as always. Wolverine there. Different angles on maybe some unused changed panels in the book there. An alteration of the ending of the X-Men storyline that they didn't get to do. They actually wanted to have Jean Grey survive rather than die and be tortured for all eternity, which is kind of like a much sadder ending. What's worse, having the character die or have her live but be imprisoned and tortured for eternity? Which version do you want to have a person that you love going through? I'd rather, it'd be better that they die, right? Anyway, reproductions of the covers. Great stuff. Yep. Look, even back in this era, you can fight against faceless, robotic, metallic, armored bad guys and have it be awesome. It's just not good when that's all you do is have faceless, metallic-shaped bad guys and have your heroes punching them nonstop. There's a right way and there's a wrong way to do it. And we all know who I'm talking about. Great cover with the Hellfire Club there. And, of course, that amazing, iconic, absolutely stunning cover right there. Classic in every way. It's fantastic. Love that thing. I could stare at that all day. And because I have this book, I can. And maybe I will. What else? We're basically done here. Make sure I'm not accidentally skipping pages. Good shot there. Wendigo just flailing Wolverine around into the trees. Looks fantastic. And then, of course, that great classic shot. Amazing stuff. Yeah, it just makes me all the more nostalgic for the old school X-Men and that era that has never been surpassed and never will. And just marveling at how good John Byrne is. It's unbelievable the skill set that he has. And I was on a live stream recently, and we're talking about what artists out there that reach old age and how many of them lose their mojo, their skill sets. Like, of course, Frank Miller comes up. He had such an incredible career on varying things with the Batman and the Daredevil and the Ronins and the Sin Cities and all that stuff. And then if you look at the stuff that he kind of produces today, now, again, granted, he's old and age and time takes its toll, but some people don't lose a step. John Byrne, as far as I'm concerned, based on what I've seen him producing, he hasn't lost a step. His art still looks the same. It still looks like he's from the old era, and he's still producing at that same quality level, which is kind of awesome. Other artists who are still as good or better now than they've ever been, I would put Mark Silvestri as hasn't lost a step. He's changed his art style around, which everyone does, but he still has every bit of his skill set. I can't say the same about Jim Lee, only because I feel like he's putting in all the effort and he's got all the skill, but his art style has changed into something I don't like as much. I don't dig it, but it's still amongst the top. I don't feel like he's lost a step. He's just changed into something that I don't like. We all know my opinions on Liefeld. His older work I can understand why it's popular, and I still like his old stuff, but anything current is just an absolute joke. And then other guys that are not quite as old as some of these classic guys like John Byrnes and Frank Millers, but like J. Scott Campbell is as good now as he's ever been. Joe Mad is as good now as he's ever been. We could all go on and on about artists and kind of how much it could kind of suck to see your favorite artist kind of diminish and not be as good as they used to be. And that's why I advocate, if you're a guy and you're trying to make your own shit, make it now before you can't. Make your own comics, make your own work. Do it before you can't, because you never know when the timer runs out and it's over. So anyway, blah, blah, blah. John Byrne, stunning skill set and an amazing pile of work. And this artist edition is just unbelievably awesome. So it's fun to look through this again and just talk on and on. So I actually was going to try and keep this to 20 or 25 minutes. Honestly, I was just going to just flip through it and just look how good it is and how amazing he is and just get in and out. But here we are, 51 minutes in. I just keep going. Anyway, thank you for watching. I hope you enjoyed this. I really do. And that's all I got for now. Thanks for joining me. See you next time.